They say blood is thicker than water, but they never tell you how easily it can stain everything you've worked so hard to build. I used to believe that my parents were my safety net, the two people in this world who would love my daughter, Lily, with the same fierce, unconditional devotion they once showed me. But looking back at the rainy Tuesday afternoon when Lily's school bus pulled up, I realized I was living in a beautifully constructed lie. My name is Elena. I'm a single mother, a title I never thought I'd carry, but one I wear like a badge of honor. I've spent the last 6 years building a life for my daughter that is filled with light, laughter, and security. Things I felt were slipping away when her father left us. To fill that gap, I leaned on my parents, Martha and Arthur. They lived in the grand, ivy-covered estate on the hill, a place that smelled of expensive beeswax and old secrets. They were the pillars of the community, always hosting charity galas and talking about the importance of family legacy. I thought I was lucky. Every weekend, Lily would go to Grandma and Grandpa's for what I called the royal treatment. She'd come home talking about tea parties, hidden garden paths, and the stories my father would tell her about our ancestors. But lately, the light in Lily's eyes had started to dim. She was quieter. She'd cling to my hand a little tighter when I dropped her off. I asked her if something was wrong, but she'd just shake her head and say, "Grandma says we have a secret. Mommy, a special secret for when I'm a big girl." I should have listened to my gut. I should have seen the way my mother looked at Lily, not with the warmth of a grandmother, but with the cold, calculating gaze of a jeweler inspecting a flawed diamond. That Tuesday, my parents had picked Lily up from school early. For a special surprise, they told me they wanted some extra time with her before their annual winter gala. When the car dropped her off at my small, modest apartment 3 hours later, the driver didn't even wait for her to get to the door. He just sped off. Lily wasn't running. She wasn't smiling. She was trudging up the walkway, her little shoulders shaking, her face streaked with tears that had dried into salty pads on her cheeks. In her arms, she clutched a heavy wooden box, dark mahogany, cold to the touch, and wrapped in a silk ribbon that looked more like a funeral shroud than a gift. "Lily, baby, what's wrong?" I rushed to her, kneeling on the damp pavement. She didn't speak. She just handed me the box, her breath hitching in a sob that broke my heart into 1,000 jagged pieces. Her voice was a tiny, shattered whisper. "Grandpa said, he said this is who I really am. He said you were hiding the truth because you're ashamed of me." My blood turned to ice. I carried her inside, set her on the sofa, and stared at that box. It felt heavy, not just with weight, but with the gravity of a betrayal I wasn't yet ready to understand. My parents had sent my 7-year-old daughter home crying with a gift that felt like a threat. With trembling fingers, I untied the silk. I opened the lid, expecting jewelry, or perhaps a cruel letter. But what sat inside changed the very foundation of my world. It wasn't just an object. It was a map of lies, a legal document, and a photograph that proved my parents weren't just my family. They were the architects of my greatest tragedy. Inside the box, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a stack of legal papers and an old, grainy photograph. The photo was of a man I recognized instantly, Mark, Lily's father. But he wasn't alone. He was sitting at my parents' dining table, laughing, shaking my father's hand. The date on the back of the photo was from 3 weeks after he had supposedly disappeared and abandoned us. I felt the air leave my lungs. For 6 years, I believed Mark had walked out on us because he didn't want the responsibility. My parents had comforted me. They had told me I was better off without a man of his low standing. They had even helped me file for sole custody, claiming they had hired private investigators who found nothing. But the papers beneath the photo told a different story. It was a signed agreement. My father had paid Mark $500,000 to leave the state and never contact me again. The gift my daughter was carrying wasn't a toy, it was a confession. But why now? I flipped to the last page. There was a handwritten note from my mother, written in her perfect, elegant script. Elena, we've decided it's time for Lily to know her place. Since you refuse to move back into the estate and follow our rules, we've decided to move forward without you. We've contacted Mark. He's coming back. And with our resources, we've already started the process to prove you are an unfit mother for withholding her father from her. This box is Lily's heritage. You are just a temporary guardian. The room spun. They hadn't just bought off my daughter's father. They had orchestrated our entire separation so they could maintain control over me. And now that I was becoming too independent, now that I was up for a promotion and planning to move further away, they were using the very men they banished as a weapon to take my child. They had told Lily that I was the liar. They told a 7-year-old girl that her mother had stolen her father away. The psychological cruelty of it was staggering. My own parents were willing to shatter a child's heart just to win a power game. I looked at Lily, who was watching me with wide, fearful eyes. Is it true, Mommy? Did you hide Daddy? I felt a surge of white-hot protective rage. The pain was there. Yes, the heartbreak of knowing my parents never loved me. Only the idea of owning me. But the strength that replaced it was cold and absolute. They thought their money made them invincible. They thought their gift would break me. No, Lily, I said, my voice steadying. Grandma and Grandpa made a big mistake. They think they can buy people like toys, but they forgot one thing. What? She whispered. They forgot that I'm your mother, and I don't break. I spent that night not in tears, but in silence. I realized that my parents had left a trail. In their arrogance, they thought providing me with the truth would make me submissive. They didn't realize they had just handed me the evidence of their conspiracy and witness tampering. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to expose the rot behind the ivy-covered walls. The Winter Gala was the social event of the year. Everyone who was anyone in our city was there: lawyers, judges, the press. My parents stood at the top of the grand staircase, draped in silk and arrogance, playing the role of the benevolent patriarchs. I didn't arrive through the back door. I walked right through the front, wearing a dress of defiant red, holding Lily's hand. My mother's face went pale when she saw me, but she forced a plastic smile. Elena, darling, you're late, she hissed as I approached. And you brought the child. We discussed this. She's to stay with the nanny. Oh, we're not staying, Mother, I said, my voice carrying across the foyer, silencing the nearby guests. We just came to return your gift. It was a bit revealing. I pulled out a flash drive. I had spent the last 48 hours working with a friend in tech and a very hungry lawyer. I didn't go to the police first. I went to the one thing my parents feared more than prison: public shame. I walked over to the AV technician running the commemorative slideshow of the family legacy. I didn't ask. I commanded. Within seconds, the large screens in the ballroom stopped showing photos of my father shaking hands with politicians. Instead, they showed the scanned images of the canceled check to Mark, the signed disappearance agreement, and most damningly, a recording I had made that morning. I had called Mark. I told him I had the money too. Double what my father gave him if he'd tell the truth on camera. He was a greedy man. He sang like a bird. The video played on the 20-foot screens. Mark admitting that Arthur and Martha had threatened to ruin his life if he didn't take the money and run, and how they were currently paying him to testify against my mental stability. The silence in the room was deafening. My father's glass of champagne shattered on the marble floor. My mother looked like a ghost. You see, I said, looking directly at the crowd, then at my parents. My parents talk a lot about legacy, but their legacy is built on the broken hearts of their own family. They didn't just lose a daughter tonight. They lost their mask. We walked out as the whispers began, whispers that would turn into a social pariah status by morning, and a legal nightmare by the end of the week. My lawyer informed me later that the evidence of their interference in a custody matter, combined with the bribery, was enough to ensure they would never be allowed near Lily again. As for Mark, he never got his second payout. I turned his recorded confession over to the authorities for extortion and fraud. He vanished again, this time for good, but without the power to hurt us. 6 months later, Lily and I were sitting in our new garden, not a grand estate, but a small, sun-drenched patch of land that belonged only to us. She was laughing again, the shadows gone from her eyes. I learned that day that some gifts are meant to destroy you, but if you're brave enough to look inside, you might just find the weapon you need to set yourself free. Revenge wasn't about hurting them. It was about stripping away their power until they were just two lonely people in a big, empty house. Blood might be thicker than water, but love is the only thing that's truly unbreakable. We are finally at peace, and for the first time in my life, the only secrets in our house are the ones about what we're having for dessert.